And I do want to thank you so much, Arlen. And I do want to encourage everyone so that we can socialize as best as we can through chat to make sure that you are responding to everyone and not just the host and panelists. So welcome, 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 everyone. I am so super excited to be here with you all. I am Dr. Tinaya York, as Arlen has already shared. I do want to take a moment just to see who is in the room or Zoom, whichever one is best. Just share your name or role. You don't have to share your name. I can see that part, but where are you from? What city, town, district, village? And one word to describe how you feel about the literacy efforts that are happening in your school right now. So let's take a few minutes and let's just socialize a little bit. Where are you from? How are you feeling about stuff that's going on? All right, Nicole. Hopeful, yes. Excited. Let's go, Chi-Town. Oh, passionate, ready, evolving, changing. Yes, curious. Stay curious, y'all. Stay curious. So awesome. Hopeful. Keep them coming in. Rockford, my hometown. Hello. See the changes. Yes. Optimistic. Well, thank you all so much. And as you come up with new stuff and share, drop it in the chat because I want you to carry those words into what we will be doing today. I am Dr. Tanea York. I am a former school and district level administrator. I'm in Chicago. I now serve as a principal coach, a consultant. I'm also a strategist, but literacy, y'all, is my jam. This is what I do. And as we go through today, we'll be focused on the left side of IPA school paradigm, giving you some input so you can really begin to think about and reimagine what is important for the literacy work in your buildings. So we have 1 hour to get through 194 pages, which gives me about 18.5 seconds per page. But no, it's not really going to be like that. We're really going to just explore some of the salient pieces of the plan. And hopefully you walk away or roll your chair away from the computer with a way to really start and to have those conversations with your staff about literacy achievement. I do want to put one reminder here, especially as school leaders or leaders, if you are at the regional level and you're in here, you are 2 to 3 steps removed from the daily instruction that happens, which is the most important part of the child's day. But your impact, which is second only to the teachers as leaders, is to create the climate for staff to learn and work together in service of children. And more importantly, it's about being open and building your knowledge so that you can make the best decisions that you can. So, as we learn together for this hour, I invite you just to keep these norms in mind as a community of learners, of leaders, even though we can't interact with each other, just using these norms as you stay curious, stay open about what we're learning. Take a few seconds to read through those. And leaning into these norms as we meet these objectives for our time together. All right. If you don't yet have pen, pencil, marker, paper in hand, or if you use your computer to take notes, like you have several tabs open, like I have on my computer right now, get that up. And also, in Arlen, if you could drop into the chat a link to the plan, because we're going to actually be in the plan today, going to do some work in that plan. So if you can, open up another tab and want you all to actually open up the literacy plan because it will be helpful for you for this session. So I'll give you some time to get ready. Oh, looking in the chat, loving literacy. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Me too. All right, so we're going to get started, and I want to talk about the why we got to this place as a state where we needed this comprehensive literacy plan. And I'm going to ask one of you to raise your hand and read this quote out loud for us. Leaning into our norms. I think Rhonda's raised her hand, Arlen.
Yeah, we've got Rhonda and Emily. Either one of you two are able to unmute your microphone. Looks like Emily's able to unmute. Emily, are you there?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
sounds good.
Thank you, Emily. Read this out loud for us.
Okay, it says, this is why I always wanted to get a special education plan because I knew I couldn't read as good as other people. I couldn't spell as good as other people. I never got it. I never got that help, he said, until a younger sibling's case manager flagged him to be screened for Redwood's literacy intervention pilot. This is something I really needed, and people have seen that I needed it. It used to hurt my feelings that he didn't get more help, he said. I was mad.
Thank you so much, Emily. This is why. It's a quote from an older reader. It's why we need this comprehensive plan. This is also why what is now Public Act 103-0402 is the hard work of organizations in the state of Illinois, of teachers, school leaders, regional leaders, parents, all stakeholders, being clear and really understanding that literacy is foundational for life, that only some of the children in Illinois were ready readers, reading well, reading proficiently, however you phrase it. And that as a state, we really needed to know how to teach reading well based on as much evidence as we had available to us. In essence, if you read the act, it's about doing what's right. And so this is also the why of this comprehensive plan. Our data, you can just look at the purple line and you can say, okay, you can look in front of it and you can look behind it and you can see the inequitable outcomes that we have. So this is our why. And when we continue to reproduce the same outcomes year over year, we have to charge ourselves with doing something very different. And in this case, it's as a state. It's as a state, really saying we want different outcomes for all of our learners. So we're going to dive into the plan itself, just to get you familiar with it. If you are familiar with it, relearn it. Relearn it so you're as familiar with it as you can be. If you have your plan open, I just want to remind you at the top, you can type in a page number if you get interested and curious, and go hit enter and go straight to that page. So the plan itself is organized in really three big sections, but it starts with the introduction, which is what I just shared with you. It's the why, it's the purpose, it's the vision, and it includes just the framing of the plan itself. And then the first goal or first section is the framework, how we're supposed to be teaching. This is what I call the meaty part of the plan. You see, it starts on page 22. It's the what of instruction, and it's the largest section of the plan. The second section goes into educator learning. It starts on page 103, and that is the what of education prep programs, what we may need to do differently about how we teach teachers, folks who want to become teachers and educators about literacy instruction, and then what we're doing for professional learning for folks who are in the field. And then the third section, or the third goal, is all around leadership, all you beautiful folks who are here in this webinar right now. And that starts on page 130. And it's just the what of how you lead this work. Then you have a section that's just the tools and resources. That starts on page 174. And then you have the glossary, which is full of some very important terms. After each of those sections, there is a workbook so that you can interact with what's there, what I'm reading, and questions that you may have. And it's organized to where you have a page that says, here are some implementation considerations. Here's a checklist of things you may want to think about, next steps, and take some notes about what you're reading. And then there's a page where you can really reflect about what you're reading in the plan. Jot some things. There's some things I agree with. Here's some things that I disagree with. Here's some things that I think we're doing pretty well right now. But really helping you reflect, really helping you think about what is in this literacy plan for our state. I pulled out those pages just for your convenience if you want to write those down. And we suggest that as you dive into the literacy plan and you begin to think about how you might share this with your staff, that you print out these pages first. Instead of printing out all 194 pages, they have the workbook section, and then dive into the plan maybe electronically, just to save a few trees if we can. So the why is here, the what is in the plan, but the how is not. The plan is really, really clear that you have autonomy if you're a school level leader and at the district level about what needs to happen either across your schools or within your school. So you won't see a lot of direction like this needs to happen by this date and you need to do this. It is really incumbent upon you to use your leadership, what you know about your school, and really dive into some of the strategic literacy and leadership moves that you need to make what's in the plan work for your school. And this is what continuous improvement is about. It is an improvement science, and we're saying, hey, try some stuff out. Do some iterative testing, refine these ideas, make it work for you, because you are the folks that are closest to your own problems. And so, since you're the closest, you guys have the most information, the most knowledge and talent to solve those things. So you have that freedom. Again, the why is there, the what is there, but the how is going to take us working together and figuring out what's best in our schools. And you can see the 3 most important strategic leadership moves in the plan. It is on page 132 if you want to tab or bookmark that. So we're going to interact a little bit with the text, and we're going to do a vocabulary knowledge rating. So you can just, for my principals and APs in the room, give you the slides. You can lift this up and do this activity with your folks. So you're going to use the chat feature. And the first thing I want you to do is just look at some of the terms that are here. I'm going to call out a few terms, and I want you to just type the word heart. If you really know this, you can define it. You can use it, and how you define the word is aligned to what's already in the literacy plan. You're going to put a heart like, yeah, I know this word. If the word is one that you've heard it, you kind of know something about it, you're going to type the word check mark. And if it's a word that you need to learn more about, you're going to put a question mark. So the first key term I'm going to throw out there is, let me see, The spirit is moving me to evidence-based practices. All right, let me see in the chat. Evidence-based practices. I see some hearts, hearts. Yes. Thanks for using the emojis. Y'all so talented. A lots of hearts. Okay. We have a pretty good shared understanding of that. Really important term or phrase. This is repeated over and over in the plan, that we are steeping our literacy instruction for our state. And what the research is telling us now is what's best for all children. All right. I'm gonna throw out another word since y'all so smart. What about systematic instruction? Where are we at with that term? Really know it, can define it, something kind of new for us. I need to learn more about that. Okay. Marks, more hearts. Check mark. All right. Okay. Might be a word we want to dive into. Got some little bit different answers. Let's try one more. What about oracy? Okay. Okay, another set of little mixed bag. Some check marks, like I've heard it, but not quite sure. Some folks saying, yep, I know about that, and I need to learn more about this. So you're going to have like about 4 to 5 minutes. I want you to choose one of these words and terms that you want to know more about. And if every word you see listed here, you're like, I really know this word very well, I invite you to go to the glossary on page 181 and just choose your own word that you want to make sure you really understand as it relates to this plan. So you're going to take 5 quiet minutes, and then we're going to do an activity through the chat with these terms. So choose the one that you want to learn more about. Go to those pages in the plan, read more about it, and I'm going to put 4 minutes on the timer. Enjoy your reading. Take another minute. All right, let's come together and I want you to raise your hand so that Arlen can open up your microphone and respond to this question. What's different about how you or your schools have really defined these terms or even talked about some of these key ideas and terms in your building? What are you learning as you look through um, the plan and think about these key terms? Got Jill.
Jill, I'm gonna allow you to unmute yourself. Her hand might have been up from, oh, there she goes. Jill, can you talk?
I can. I'm just switching. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Sure
sounds
can.
good.
Sorry. Yes, my hand was up from before, but I can still go.
Thank you.
So, I don't I don't know that it's really something that's been oracy. So I don't know if it's really been something that's different than how we've defined it. But a lot of the schools that I work with don't recognize that because it's not so evident in our standards.
Thank you so much for that, Jill. Anyone else? What are you discovering as you look at how these terms are defined here for us? Yeah. Katie shared in the chat that she thinks oracy is somewhat forgotten about as our students become older. Yeah. Anyone else? All right. So we're going to take a moment also and dive a little bit deeper into the meat. I have up here on the screen, and they're on pages 17 to 19 in the actual plan. Different roles are tended to and saying these are the areas of the plan that you really need to read for yourself. Like if you don't read anything else, read these sections. And then I just put just as a quick reference, the pages. So you already had the pages for the vision and the purpose for the framework. But then these couple areas here that are also important is how this relates to MTSS, which starts on page 70, assessments on page 73, and then intervention, which is on page 74. And so the hope here is that we think about these areas, and Jill and Katie brought up oracy as one of those areas that we don't talk about as much. And if you're familiar with the reading panel study, oracy was not an area, nor writing, which Illinois has added to theirs, which is why we have 7 components of literacy for our framework and not 5. And so I want to invite you all to take a moment to choose which of these areas of the components of literacy you want to read about most, and just tab those areas if you can in PDF. If you have Cami, you may be taking notes on the literacy plan as you're reading through it. Each of the 7 components have 4 pages. They're all organized in the same way. The very first page gives you an overview about what that component is. And it also shows you what it may look like across the development of a child from young all the way up to young learner up to high school. Then the second page of this tells you what the considerations are for different types of learners. So our multilingual learners, advanced learners, our children who have diverse learning needs, and then also a section that has intervention support. So what might intervention look like for a child who may be having difficulty with this component? On the next page, you have some further reading. So there's some resources embedded. And then there's a statement that's on each one that talks about the idea that this is tier 1 instruction. The plan is focused on tier 1, getting the best instruction during the day. And then we touch on ways that we might intervene, but that is not the crux of the comprehensive plan. It is about tier 1. And then the last page of each of these components tells you what is the instructional practice that is based on the evidence, what grade level you might see this instruction in, the standard it's aligned to, and then examples of practices that are not aligned to the evidence. This is where I really want to encourage you all as leaders to not take this and turn it into a checklist and say to folks, I'm looking for these things in the classroom. If I don't see this thing without providing well-rounded feedback, professional learning, because when we do those things, I really want to call out, sometimes we do those things, sometimes out of fear, not being vulnerable enough, like I may not know what this thing really looks like in the classroom, but I have this checklist. I really want to push you guys not to fall into that trap, rather really use it to help your teachers, staff, your seekers, support understand better what instruction should look like based on the evidence. So I want you to take a moment and choose one of these components to review. I'm just going to give about 3 to 4 minutes, just kind of like a quick read. And we're going to do an activity called a written popcorn. Okay. So if you don't have, oh no, we can't do the written popcorn because you guys can't see each other. So what will happen, which I would never encourage you to do it quite this way in the classroom, is I hope you'll lean into the norms and allow me to popcorn by calling on someone's name and having them to share. Thank you, Bridget, for that. And so you can see each other's comments. So what we would have to do is someone who's commented before, you have to scroll and then popcorn to a name that you see. We'll try it out. We'll test it out, guys. I'm okay with trying new stuff. So just take about 3 minutes or so looking in the plan. If you don't have it up and you're new, I'll drop it in the chat again. Pull up the plan. The page numbers are right here. I'm going to go to, or see if you want to read more about that, go to 34. You really want to see, hey, what are we saying is evidence-based instruction in writing? Go ahead, pop page 58. Take 3 minutes, find your zone, and get prepared to learn from each other. All right, y'all, we're going to try this written popcorn, and I want you to just think about what you are learning from just looking at what's there around instruction, evidence-based instruction for our state, and how this may inform your leadership. And so, Bridget, I'm going to start with you. And then what Bridget is going to do is she's going to post a response. And then after she posts her response, she's going to name someone else in the chat to share. And we'll just do a couple rounds of this. Bridget, thank you so much for sort of agreeing to start us off. So, Bridget, what came up for you? What section did you read, and how is it informing your leadership? And we can you put Bridget on unmute Bridget so she can speak?
Oh yeah, Bridget, if you'd raise your hand, that'll pop you up to the top so I can see you. There you go. And now Bridget can unmute. And Bridget, you're still muted at this time. You'll have to click the little microphone icon in the lower. There you go.
I got it. Okay, sorry about that. I'm looking at two screens, so I missed that. I chose the comprehension section, and I was looking at the elementary section quite a bit, and really focusing on extracting meaning, and then what I really wanted to do, because this is something we're working on as a staff, is how can I connect that to extended responses? And so, but I think that what they struggle is how they don't really understand even what they're reading. And so that's what I'm hopeful that we can make connections here. And so are there things like, even in the young learners, are there visual aids that can help students develop that? You know, we use things like graphic organizers. And so that's what I'm hopeful that we can do together, is to create some sort of system for our students.
All right. Thank you, Bridget, so much. Bridget, is there a name you want to call out that you see in the chat? And that person, you can write your response, or you can raise your hand and we'll have you come on.
Oh, man, I have several people that I saw in the chat. I am going to call on Melanie Gravel.
All right, Melanie.
Okay, Melanie, you can unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Bridget. Good to hear from you. I focused on the section on phonological awareness, and I think for me, the table on the core instructional practices and what's aligned with evidence or not aligned is really helpful. And particularly in this section, it was talking about the importance of explicit instruction that's also systematic. So there's a progression that we would see. We wouldn't want things just like isolated or not acknowledging that progression. And then also what stood out again is just that practices that promote memorization are not aligned with evidence. And those are a lot of the things that we see, some past and maybe even current practices rooted in that memorization, but that's not really what this is about. So those were some key takeaways for me.
Awesome. Melanie, can you call out a name and they can either write their response or raise their hand so they can come off mute?
Of course. Let me take a look. I would like to call out, let's see. How about Nancy Buckingham?
Okay, Nancy, if you want to raise your hand, if you're there, and I will allow you to unmute yourself, or I'll try to find you on the list. Nancy, there she is. Okay, Nancy, you've been allowed to talk. If you're there with us, let us know.
Okay.
Okay, you're on.
Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay. There's a few of us in here, so we're playing with the computer and the speakers and stuff. So it's been a little confusing. We're doing this. For us as reading specialists, we were pretty familiar with the different areas. So what we did was really try to just kind of do more of an overview and kind of like looking through how this is set up and how this would work with a school and using it. So what each page looked like, just kind of being familiar. And I love the systematic way it's set up so that it's like, this is what it is, this is what it isn't, what other, in every component, while it says something different, it looks the same as far as how it's set up with what practices you should use, what it might look like in intervention, things that would be important to look at. So we really kind of more looked at the structure of it than we did the information that was in it.
That is absolutely okay, because it helps you figure out as leaders, as reading specialists, how you might use the plan and the tool in this organization. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Nancy, for participating in that popcorn and being put a little bit on the spot. I truly, truly appreciate you. We're gonna move forward a little bit and dive into, I'm going to skip the reminder, what the aim of the literacy plan is, and just share some specific things that you can think about doing in your buildings or across your schools to figure out how we might reduce the predictability of outcomes for Black and Brown children, for our English learners or multilingual learners, for our children who are diverse learners, right? Doing something different requires you to really start with a very clear vision for your leadership. And there are some questions on page 142, again, calling out the workbook that can help you reflect. But if you are going to lead for literacy, you have to have vision, you have to have a strategy, and you have to put things in action. But some of this work really does require you to be vulnerable. It requires you to be honest about what's happening in your buildings. It requires you to say, I don't quite know, and being okay with that. Because the state is not going to tell you how you should do everything. There was a question in the Q&A. There is no timeline for exact implementation. There aren't things like that coming from the state. Now, your district might put some things in place around it. But even if that happens, as a leader, you are still going to be responsible for how the message is communicated to your staff. That is what's key for a leader. And so as you think about your vision for leading, for literacy in your building, you have to be able to answer the question of what is the story that you want to tell about your leadership that impacted the right to literacy for all of your children. What we are talking about is really changing children's lives. And so you have to figure out what that story is. And once you figure out what that vision is, you have to then do a dive into your data and be honest about what story your data tell you about the right of literacy for all children. I can tell you that throughout the process of going to the listening tours, which some of you were probably at, stories we were sharing, we would have people saying, our data just looks great. It looks fine. We don't need this. And when you hear things like that, sometimes that's folks putting up an armor or a defense to say, we don't need this kind of help. But if we didn't need this, we're all part of the system that all of our children will have access to high quality education. Our data for the state would not look like it did. And when you start to disaggregate your data, you'll see maybe a different story. So when you have your vision, You're clear about what outcomes you're going to have. That strategy is what sits in the middle of the gap. Your vision is what you want for all of your children in your building. I'm going to keep repeating it because this is so important for a leader. You have to be clear on what it is you want to see so that it can become reality. You have to be clear on the story that your data is actually telling you. And that gap in between is where your strategy has to sit. It needs to be based on the data that you have in your building. Now, data does not just have to be the numbers. So when we think about some strategies that you can employ as a leader, I've just listed a few strategies you can use for your meetings, strategies you can use for your own learning. So take a second to look at those, and you can pop in the chat something that, you know what, this is something that we need to consider doing so that we have a very clear vision for how we're going to lead this work, and we start figuring out what our strategy is. Take a second, look at those, and you could also share something that's not here. What of these strategies might be something you need to consider? I absolutely will, Melanie. And I really do encourage folks, if you haven't ever, just take an hour, sit in the classroom, see what you see. Just see what you see and say, did I see this thing as it was described in the literacy plan on this evidence-based instruction? Who might I ask? What more do I need to learn? Really stay curious. Thank you, Kimberly. She says she would suggest taking an hour a week to get ongoing, clear classroom observational data. Absolutely. Talk to your students. Students are an excellent source of information. They're the ones experiencing the literacy instruction. How does that play into your strategy? Maybe it's a baby that's really struggling or a child that's doing well. And you're just asking them, how are you experiencing reading and writing in your classroom? What's working? What's not working? Once you have your strategy, you need to move to action. So again, the biggest chunk, the meaty part of this is the framework itself for evidence-based literacy instruction. And a really important administrative move may be just literally just to create the space for your staff to read and analyze what Nancy raised as specialists. They're looking at it. We're just trying to see how this thing is structured, having them ask questions. Things you want to consider is, what do I understand about literacy instruction in my building? How do I create these safe spaces? Because for some teachers, it's going to be new. For a lot of teachers, I'm going to keep it real. For a lot of teachers, teaching in more systematic ways, using explicit instruction, making sure we're using the evidence is going to be different than how they were taught to teach reading, to teach literacy to their children. And so as administrators, you're going to have to create spaces where they feel safe to try new things, to bring back what they're learning and talk with their colleagues. And there are some strategies that are listed here that you might try. And if there is something you want to add, please feel free to drop it in the chat, or an idea that you see here that, yep, I think that's a pretty good idea for us to use. You can go ahead and do that. Yeah. Thanks, Kim, for adding and using those lesson plans too. All right, in the last few minutes that we have here, I do want to raise what's next based on what the state is doing. So there will be a rubric that districts can use to evaluate curricula and select and implement evidence-based and culturally relevant curriculum and programs in their building. Also, as part of that public act, there will be a template to support districts when they're developing their own literacy plans. There'll be guidance coming out based on the practices on how we might train teachers, how we might use coaches. And before January 1st, 2025, the state is also going to be involved in developing like micro-credentials for literacy instruction and tools to evaluate professional development and training programs. So there's lots that is going on in the actual act itself to improve the literacy outcomes for our children. Also, what is coming up, some ISB supports. They're going to hold office hours. They'll be updating the listserv so you can stay connected and learn as much as you want. I know some folks said, I'm here to learn. I'm here to get as much as I can so I can help my school. So there will be more. There'll be a getting started toolkit for administrators available in March. And then there'll be some ISB sponsored professional developments in the late spring, early summer, and then some additional resources that will come out. So Kim, you asked, when is the rubric template set to release? And if I have it right, it is in July. There is not a draft of the literacy rubric yet that is available. I can just drop the Atlas protocol right there. Thank you, Erica. Yep, I was like, I believe it's July 2024. I'm gonna drop the Atlas protocol right here in the chat so you guys can have that in your arsenal. And then I also see some other questions here. So Jill asked the difference between today's session and next week's high school session. The lens will be a little bit different for high school. Because you have older readers, I'll dive into some things that sometimes we're not talking about tier 1, now we're actually talking about intervention and how that nests itself within this plan. So it won't be uber different. Jill, you might not really miss too much if you are able to attend. Is ISB going to provide funding and professional development to get schools up to speed on implementation? That is a work in progress, Kim. There are some funds that have been provided as part of this public act, I believe about 3 million, but writ large, that is another thing that advocates are working on. And then access to coaching may be more of a district specific, but not statewide. Right. And there are office hours if you want to ask the state directly, like, hey, we need support with this. What does this look like? And then there's a question from Melanie. A few slides ago, there was a reference to the framework for evidence-based literacy instruction. Is there a link to this? The framework for evidence-based is what's already in the literacy plan. It's not something different. In our last few minutes, I do want to encourage you to think about how you're going to do something different in your schools, how you are going to disrupt the predictability of students who have the same outcomes year over year. And to really think about our vision, strategy, and our actions so that we can change outcomes for our children. That is what literacy and justice for all is all about. I do have some quick tips here that didn't quite have in like the strategy section, but I really do invite folks just to read the plan. Think about how your team meetings can model the instruction you want to see in your classrooms. What you do with your adult learners in your building should not look drastically different than how you want them teaching the children. Don't pile on, folks. Don't eliminate duplicate efforts. If you have your school improvement plan, you guys are already doing some work. We're not saying lift up this plan and now change everything you're doing. Really evaluate the stuff that you already have going on. Okay? And then maintain that sense of urgency, but make sure you truly plan for effectiveness. Don't just throw everything you have in the garbage can before you really evaluate what can be used. Again, having your vision first. And before we close out, if you can please think about one action that you know that you're going to take to really reimagine what the literacy instruction in your classrooms need to look like. Please drop that in the chat. Whether it's something you need to do internally, maybe you need to just be more vulnerable. Maybe you need to look in the budget and think about, is my budget aligned with our values? Whatever it is, please drop in the chat one action you want to take to reimagine literacy instruction in your buildings. Thank you, Melanie. Okay. Amanda, I believe you can find that hour. I am rooting for you. Thank you, Julie. Yep. Starts with sharing the knowledge, right? That's figuring out, hey, who can also help lead this work? I'm dropping a form in the chat, if you would be so kind to fill that out. If you have questions and need some support, you can put your information there. We can respond to you. Thank you guys so much for spending an hour of your time here in this webinar. I am humbled and I am so excited that you guys are excited about changing the trajectory of the lives of the children who are in your building. Have a beautiful, beautiful evening.
All right, Tinaya, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us and how to become a literacy leader in your building. Lots of thank yous coming into the chat. Again, take a chance to get Tinaya's link to the Google form for the evaluation. I'll also be following up tomorrow with the ISB evaluation. So you'll be able to get your professional development hour for spending your time with us. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording at this time.